Right when you are.
Great. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Board of Supervisors meeting for Monday, June 27th, 2022, here in Lake Tahoe. It is just after 2 o'clock, and we'll start with a flag salute led by Supervisor Jones.
Please join me in the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We have one item of business today on this special meeting, and that is a report on North Tahoe Eastern Placer Partnerships and Regulatory Framework. And we're honored today to have both Stephanie Holloway to present, as well as Joanne Marquetta, the Executive Director for Tahoe Regional Planning Agency, for about 3 more days. That's why she has a big smile on her face. We're nearing the end of her wonderful tenure with us. So, Stephanie, I'll turn it over to you.
Great. Good afternoon, Chair Gustafson, members of the board, my esteemed colleagues. Stephanie Holloway with your Tahoe Operations Manager here in Tahoe in the County Executive's Office. So happy to be here on behalf of the Tahoe team, myself, really excited to have your board here to really walk you through some history of our Tahoe partnership and our collaboration of this region, and also talk to you about some of our current challenges. So wonderful day here in Tahoe. I was joking on the way in that it was hard to get in the work mindset with all that smell of sunscreen on the way in. So, but it's busy here and we're happy for it. I'll just open by saying, really over the last 10 months, I've had a front row seat at many of these partnerships and organizations that we're going to walk through today, and have really an appreciation for the level of investment emotionally, financially in this region, really to support a common mission of balance, stewardship, as well as our supporting our local economy. So it's really been an education for me, really putting a number of pieces together in this presentation, and I hope it's educational for you as well as our public. So let me jump over here to our overview and agenda for this afternoon. We are going to just start by layering in some of those partners, starting with our governmental relationships of the region, building on some key goals for the Tahoe region. The Tahoe Regional Planning Agency is here. They have a number of regional plans, transportation plans, our local Tahoe Basin Area Plan, and augmenting transportation plan for Placer, as well as our tourism tourism master plan, and a number of economic incentives that your board has adopted over the years. I also want to highlight really some of the amazing work with our special districts and our community partners. Many of these organizations and volunteers advised your board on a number of issues, from Tahoe special services to investments in our infrastructure, and then most recently focused on housing and transportation. I'll talk a little bit about those 2 key areas at the end. And then, like I mentioned, lastly, we'll talk about some of our current priorities. So let me start at the regional level, talking about our governmental partners here. I already highlighted both TRPA and TTD. In the basin, the basin is presided over by these 2 organizations on the federal and state level. TRPA and TTD was created through a bi-state compact in 1969, and Joanne's going to give you some history on that, and really established a framework of stewardship for the Tahoe area. Another couple of key federal and state organizations here on the slide I just want to highlight, really charged with conservation and protecting both our natural and developed environments. And these include the California Tahoe Conservancy, the U.S. Forest Service, state parks, as well as CAL FIRE. So you can see a lot of our state and federal partners that are really instrumental in this region. I'll just mention, outside the basin, our north, as well as the town of Truckee. A lot of synergy there with our resort triangle, so not just in the basin, but also reaching outside of our regional partners go beyond the basin boundary to that area as well. But inside the basin, just to touch on the coordination and collaboration, there's 5 local governments, as many of you know, 4 counties and 1 city, the city of South Lake Tahoe. So a lot of that collaboration is really convened at the TRPA and TTD level on a number of boards, as well as committees and subcommittees. Many of those committees that our team is also involved in. So TRPA, I'm going to let Joanne give you the details, but I'll just intro this and really saying that TRPA has a mission of creating balance, balancing the unique treasure of Lake Tahoe from a natural perspective, but also the human environment within the Tahoe region, understanding of the environment. So I'm going to pause here and introduce Joanne Marquetta once more, the Executive Director of TRPA. She's going to go through a number of, maybe. There we go. I think you just have 1 slide, so.
Thank you. Good afternoon, members of the board. Just for the record, Joanne Marquetta. Beautiful day, absolutely spectacular day here in Tahoe. Thank you so much for the invitation. I'm going to give you some of the flavor of Tahoe today, but first I'm going to give you some of the basics. And Tahoe's context has always been complex because the lake that defines the place is actually at the crossroad of so many different jurisdictional boundaries, and therefore it represents so many different points of view and culture clashes. And so it's probably going to be about 25 minutes today. I'm going to speak first to Tahoe and its history and the origins and the role of the agency that I've led for 13 years, the Tahoe Regional Planning Agency, and then more importantly, I'm going to speak to the culture of Tahoe and how we actually get things done. Let's start 6 decades ago. And in the mid-1960s, overdevelopment was actually threatening Lake Tahoe and its environment. A city the size of San Francisco was envisioned here. And today, instead of 750,000 residents and 4-lane highways, Tahoe has about 60,000 residents and still predominantly rural. But in the 60s, the rush to develop had already started, and we were draining the Sierra's largest marsh, and the first 3,000 housing units of a planned development that was 3 times that size was built at the Tahoe Keys. State leaders at the time in California and Nevada realized that without action, the lake and the iconic alpine environment here would be lost. So in response, in 1969, California and Nevada, with the approval of Congress, established TRPA as a bi-state compact agency and through a bi-state compact agreement. That agreement charged TRPA with protecting Lake Tahoe as a regional authority and harmonizing the natural and human-made environments here. And TRPA in our first decades did successfully halt that unchecked development. There are hundreds of other compacts in the country, but Tahoe's is unique because TRPA's authority is extremely broad. It gives us not only planning authority, but regulatory and environmental protection and even enforcement authority over the region. So we are not a single purpose agency, and the compact actually requires that we address everything from land use to transportation to recreation to conservation and achieve and maintain special standards that we set for the region that you often hear referred to as thresholds. While we do that at the same time while we provide for orderly growth and development here. TRPA's jurisdiction also spans across state lines. 2/3 of the jurisdiction is in California, 1/3 of the lake is in Nevada. And then the compact sets this new regional government boundary. It's not along any existing jurisdictional lines. It actually cuts everything in pieces, but it instead was drawn in an ecological system boundary. That was an incredibly innovative for its time, because no single jurisdiction could actually protect the lake and its ecosystem on its own. So 2 states, local governments have representatives on TRPA's 15-member governing board, 7 from Nevada, 7 from California, and 1 non-voting federal presidential appointee. So there are actually portions of 5 local governments jurisdictions that touch the lake within the region's bounds. Douglas and Washoe in Nevada. There is actually a small rural portion of Carson City, Placer and El Dorado in California, and then the city of South Lake Tahoe is fully encompassed within the region. The vast majority of the land base here, nearly 80%, is under federal ownership. You add, and that's with the Forest Service, you add another just about 10%, which is state parks and municipal parks. That's almost 90% of the basin is held in public lands. Only about 10% of the basin's land is in private ownership, and these are largely developed areas in our small town centers that are concentrated here around the lakeshore. So you State Line in the Casino Core, Incline Village, South Lake Tahoe, Kings Beach, Tahoe City. We make, with that frame, we make all of our decisions in consultation with a 21-member advisory planning commission, and that includes the Washoe Tribe, State Water Resource Agencies, Tahoe Science Council, Fire District representatives. So everything that we do here, everything is in coordination and partnership with multiple jurisdictions, different agencies, and different landowners. And that idea, coordination and partnership, is important, and I'm going to come back to that. So the framework of the compact is actually threefold. We adopt regional environmental standards called thresholds. We create and continually update a regional plan to meet those adopted standards. And then we're also responsible to actually assure implementation of projects and programs to achieve the plan and maintain those standards. We're the only entity in the basin held wholly accountable by law for others' outcomes. So we actually have to evaluate progress against our standards every 4 years. And the last threshold evaluation showed that 79% were in attainment and 96% were trending in the right direction. Lake Tahoe as a region is 500 square miles, steep, high alpine forest, one of the deepest, clearest, large alpine lakes in the world. The lake, 12 miles long, 22 miles wide, and 72 miles of shoreline. So most of the resource degradation here happened in the 1950s through the 1970s, prior to the first comprehensive 1987 regional plan. And it was in those early decades that private development actually destroyed 75% of the marshes, 50% of the meadows, 35% of the stream zones. And those are the natural systems that filter nutrients and pollutants before they get to the lake, and it protects the crystal clear water quality here. So it's fair to say that TRPA is Tahoe's backbone organization that others must count on to get beyond some of the most basic public policy impasses here. We chart the cross-jurisdictional shared path, common purpose, and we do that for the region. We don't ever do it alone, but without us, it's fair to say really big things can't happen for this region. And to give you just a sense of some of those big things, I'm going to take you on a really short tour. I did this for our governing board in 2011, but what were the big quantum leaps of each decade, the policy dissonance and the essential compromises that have settled those differences over five decades here. So starting in the 1960s, it was the decade of runaway growth. And in addition to, that housing development, 10,000 unit housing development at the Keys, we had new casinos, we had Olympic game infrastructure all around the basin, and plans for a 4-lane highway. The essential compromise of the 60s was to stop the growing threat of overdevelopment, and that was done by the birth of the 1969 compact that established TRPA. It was a bi-state agreement to create the foundations for growth control, and it was before its time. In the 70s, and we get into the 70s, the problem of harmful development was actually continuing, and it was due to state-local tensions. And at that time, if a project wasn't rejected, it was automatically approved. So locally elected representatives were angry. They didn't want to accept the state's influence on development here. And the essential compromise then of the 70s was to amend the compact. The 1980 compact came into being, and local government agreed to give over more control to the two states through its voting rules in place of turning Tahoe into a federally managed jurisdiction as a scenic area. Then in the 1980s, the problem was, how do you implement growth control in the face of the 80s was predominated by this philosophical split, private property rights versus environmental protection. It was either or, it was us versus them. And after population had grown here by 75% in the 1970s, the essential compromise was private property owners would preserve their development rights in return for reducing the overall potential through parcel acquisition. So nearly 6,000 residential development rights were retired through fair market value, government purchase, arm's length purchase of ecologically sensitive lots. And that's happened through the Tahoe Conservancy, as well as its Nevada state counterpart. It's reduced the overall development potential of Tahoe to protect the environment here. Then we get into the 1990s. The essential problem was this run on residential development that was outpacing environmental gains. And the core compromise then in the 90s was to begin to correct the problems of the past, to restore the watershed, to repair the legacy damage. And what we did was we spawned what we call the Lake Tahoe Environmental Improvement Program. We know it by the EIP. The EIP connects multiple sectors in this common mission to protect and restore Lake Tahoe. So over the next 25 years, we enlisted more and more and more partners. Today, it's over 80 partners, probably close to 100 partners today, federal, state, local, private, all working together to implement. TRPA coordinates that multi-sector partnership, and the EIP actually birthed the partnership principle for Tahoe. All sectors would put skin in the game and invest in this shared purpose of environmental improvements. So successful has been the EIP to date that partnership has leveraged from each other and invested more than $2.6 billion in restoration and improvements for Tahoe to protect both the economy and its environment. In the 2000s, the partnership is learning to walk, right? We moved from crawling to walking. We're learning how to work together. We're building trust. Problems became more targeted in the 2000s. We dug into shore zone development limits. We dug into water quality and hydrocarbons from dirty two-stroke engines were polluting the waters here. And eventually we banned two-stroke engines. The prevention of catastrophic fire, major theme. We pushed the basin toward proactive fuels treatments and formed the Tahoe Fire and Fuels Team, which was 20 organizations, fire districts, other organizations working together on forest treatment. We dug into new aquatic invasive species threats when we saw that they had crossed the Rockies, these species had crossed the Rockies and they were right nearby in Lake Mead. So the compromises for each category of threat grew by developing wider and wider and wider partnerships and better collaborative process. Then finally, in the 2010s, 2 decades of EIP partnership projects and lake clarity decline was actually slowing. It was within reach. Significant investment in new science led us to this really epic compromise. It was counterintuitive. We had spent 4 decades stopping development. The compromise now was actually to encourage more, but a different kind of development. It was environmentally beneficial redevelopment and revitalization to achieve lake clarity and other economic goals for the region. Now here we are in the second decade of the 21st century, and we face even yet more epochal challenges of climate effect, population pressure, radically divisive political divides. How are we going to tackle even bigger challenges? And what are the lessons of our history to chart and the path that we can chart to solve even greater challenges? I submit to you the bare facts of Tahoe's history don't actually answer those new questions. But what I think what can tell us more is to look at what happened, not at what happens, but more at how it happens, and to see more of the real Tahoe, how big things happen for us here. I want us to take a slightly closer look at the culture of Tahoe and how it has changed to accomplish real progress for this place. I have both the privilege and the burden of perspective. Almost 2 decades of firsthand experience here leading TRPA came 17 years ago. TRPA represents a 52-year partnership among 2 states, 6 local governments, and the federal sector. The agency TRPA has been at the epicenter of literally every significant issue and controversy. And so I'm going to spend my last few minutes here offering an insider's perspective of what accounts for Tahoe's success. And I'm going to show you that it's partnerships that create the progress and success for Tahoe. And without that, we all fail. And I'm going to tell the story of the culture of this place, starting with what it was like when I started 17 years ago, what happened as a result of what I saw, and what it's like now. Why is that important to you? Why is it even interesting? It's because Tahoe isn't just an ecological icon. Tahoe is an economic engine for so many, for Placer County, for the whole bi-state region. And since past can be prologue, there are parts of Tahoe's past that you don't want to be prologue. So let me take you on this short journey on it's kind of an inside baseball story to understand Tahoe. What was it like 17 years ago? When I came to TRPA in 2005, the region's culture was independent, go it alone, command and control. TRPA was the agency to hate, the staff were the public punching bags, and everyone disdained us. We were all seen as the obstacles to progress, and we were the people who stopped things. And if people knew that you worked at TRPA, you'd literally be verbally abused in the community, at the grocery store, at the drugstore. When I came here and I revealed I'd taken a job at TRPA, the inevitable response was, "Why would you do that? Too bad for you." And I was like, what's wrong with this place? Why is everybody angry? Everybody's angry. The region's prevailing strategies at the time were almost all regulatory command and control, my way or the highway. TRPA's answer to why do I have to do it that way was because I said so. And they called it the I code pejoratively. Why do you have to do that? Because I said so. The solution to almost every problem was for TRPA to tell others what to do. It was often through regulation. The strategy was top down, and it always came from within TRPA alone. All of this came from a prevailing historic relational culture of us versus them. Since the 80s, it had been environmentalists versus property rights. Those differing interests quietly or not hated one another, because in the property rights disputes of the 80s, we bounced up and down on Fifth Amendment's takings through the courts. It was really fun for the lawyers, Karen, but not so much for the people, because we had literally destroyed people's livelihoods, their families, their economic ground, and their homes. TRPA was at war against the outside world, and the agency and region had this bunkered, victim-based culture as a result, and that culture bled through to almost everything. At TRPA, we were backlogged by thousands of permits, and TRPA was reluctant to engage too much in public inquiry. And as a result, we faced a whole lot of angry people. So what happened as a result of that? Because for decades, everything had been a fight. The prevailing culture inside TRPA and outside and across the basin was us versus them. We exacerbated, but we didn't solve divides. And the culture bred a California versus Nevada split, and it exacerbated the old state versus local government divides. And in our TRPA governing board dynamics, California was perceived as the single-purpose bully concerned only with environmental concerns, regardless of people or economy. Nevada were the battle-born patriots standing up for private property, truth, justice, and the American way. Local governments were the beleaguered victims suffering at the hands of government overreach. The results at our decision-making dais were all narrow win-lose splits. Winner take all, angry losers would gird for the retribution on the next issue. And our focus remained where it started in the 1980s. It was stop development. And with stop development as our objective, our TRPA governing board meetings used to be consumed by months and months of multiple hearings on single projects. Bring me a rock, don't like that rock. Bring me another rock, don't like that one either. And there were very few, if any, practiced methods of consensus, fewer methods to find common ground, except do-overs that satisfied very few. And so for a regional agency, it all led to these incredibly ridiculous results. In the ill-used time, we spent multiple hearings debating the shape of a driveway, or whether, staring at a faded aerial photo, and whether a white cap was actually a buoy, or was it really a seagull without regulatory standing. It was an extraordinary effort and time spent not advancing any progress or policy or change in any meaningful way. And even our broad policy work that was ongoing was similarly stalled. Regional policy work was beleaguered by polarization, where we couldn't break the logjam of our philosophical divides here. The shoreline plan and its policies is my favorite example. We were working to prevent overdevelopment along the lakeshore, and it was the last undone vestige of the 1987 regional plan. It took 7 tries, over 30 years, 5 EISs, tens of millions of dollars, with no approved outcome. And when it was adopted narrowly and by a heavily split vote finally in 2008, it went straight to litigation and got kicked back 2 years later for, guess what? A redo. Even for our regionally significant projects, we had no established or effective means to work out controversies. And so when it got to TRPA's governing board, there'd be these internecine fights that would play out in our deliberations. The project would fail, usually multiple times, costing years of delay and years of churn. Your chair, Cindy Gustafson, I know recalls the multiple hearings and many years it took to deliver the regionally significant Kings Beach Commercial Core Improvement Project, which is right outside our door here. And we're all enjoying that today. The worst case of all of this was a comprehensive regional plan update that we were working on in the Y2K decade. We were spinning throughout the 2000s, and we could make little progress to move past all these myriad of divides. And so in the decades of the 90s and 2000s, we were stalled again and again and again and again. And then we got diverted even further. The Angora fire hit. It was a small but extremely destructive fire, destroyed 250 homes overnight. 2 full years of outside controversy, Blue Ribbon Commission, and oversight. Calls came from the highest state and federal levels. Change or die. And shortly afterward, more salt in the wound. The Great Recession melted down the economy here, everywhere, including in Tahoe. The culture we'd fostered came into focus. TRPA and Tahoe lacked credibility due to our failed track record. From history, we put in a lot of effort on things, but we were going almost nowhere. And so TRPA became the scapegoat for that small fire. And we were blamed as the cause of the devastation. And what happened as a result of all of that us versus them culture, there was still no proven path to progress or success for anyone. Okay, what did we do about it? As the Tahoe region crawled out of Angora and out of the economic meltdown of the Great Recession, the region, I felt like we were licking our gaping wounds. We needed a new way. Somehow we had to move from my way, the individual insular bunker mentality, to our way. But how would we do that? The normal human tendency, I think, is to presume that what exists is going to continue. So everyone took Tahoe's bi-state partnership for granted, and history defies complacency. 8 times in TRPA's history, interests have seriously tried to dissolve Tahoe's multi-sector partnership. And in 2011, in the greatest of great ironies, we got this really perverse shot in the arm for a fundamental paradigm shift away from Tahoe's divided approach of its history, the path that was to face down yet one more existential crisis. There had been a hugely contentious hearing on the Nevada side project over at the Tahoe Biltmore. We call it Bodo Bay. A painful 12-hour hearing was probably the straw that broke the camel's back, because shortly afterward, a legislator named John Lee in Nevada dropped a bill, SB 271, calling for Nevada to pull out of the 40-year-old partnership agreement between the two states and to dissolve TRPA along with that 40-year-old partnership. My first response, and I recall it well, was, happened before, this isn't going to go anywhere. A few weeks later, I was in legislative hearings justifying TRPA's existence, and the multi-sector partnership at that time was seen as more of an obstacle than an aid. So by the end of it, it was like having a cancer diagnosis where you come out the other side and you're alive and you see the path of life really differently. So it took that very real threat of dissolution to return us to the importance of partnership, consensus, working to find common ground, compromise solutions. And to get to the truly regionally significant, we needed to rebuild relationships and needed also deep process and governance changes to make that paradigm shift, to unseat the us versus them culture that led so often to stall. Senator Feinstein at the time said to the 2 governors at the August summit that we hold here in Tahoe every year, she said, put this partnership back together. And we found breakthrough on our stall of the regional plan update by connecting up Nevada's interest in economic development with California's, environmental interests, sort of their environmental crusades with the local government's private sector interests and community revitalization under this really simple idea of the concept of environmental redevelopment. It wasn't grow Tahoe, but it was remake the old dated environment of Tahoe that was causing environmental harm. So we set that system anew in 2012 on the date with great synergy, 12-12-12, and we now delegate far more single project and planning authority to local governments through this new paradigm, what we call area plans and conformance review, to meet our regional goals and standards. It was used elsewhere. It worked. We adopted it. And when it came time to approve the regional plan, I actually challenged the TRPA governing board at the time. I said, scale up to your right role, scale up to the regional scale. TRPA should be focused on large, strategic, regionally significant and impactful initiatives and stop crawling around in the weeds. And to get there, we had to also make internal culture change within our own organization. And we adopted the partnership way. We adopted a principle called partnership and collaboration, became our hedgehog concept. If you know anything about Jim Collins's 30 years of research on what makes great and enduring organizations, our hedgehog concept was partnership and collaboration, relationship and connecting the unconnected, binding divided dots, finding shared purpose, seeking common ground and agreement, despite our differences, became everything in what we do. We adopted strategic initiatives grounded in partnership, and we made deep process and governance changes. We committed to the regular practice of using multi-stakeholder work groups to look for consensus solutions. And at every stage, we looked for more flexible stakeholder process. These changes in our process and approach and our governance capacity recognized that all progress is actually relational progress. It's not a hardened position that matters. It's the willingness to relate to others who differ from you on your position and to find and harmonize those differences. And relationship is everything. And partnership and collaboration has become the secret sauce to Tahoe's success. We made this really intentional change in the way the Tahoe Basin operates. And we moved from my way of the 1980s and 90s to our way of partnership and collaboration. And as a result, we've made epic record accomplishments over a decade, all good outcomes accomplished by building trust. And anybody who's heard me speak before has heard me say this: progress happens at the speed of trust. So that brings me one final point. And it is perhaps the most essential point and the most important insight that I offer from my in the trench experience here in Tahoe. The role of TRPA in this region differs from other boards and organizations. TRPA is a one-of-a-kind organization in the nation. We're more than a mere regulatory agency. We are the only organization held wholly accountable to others' outcomes, and that's why partnership is essential to how we operate. TRPA's primary role in the region is to hold the partnership together. Our role is to reconcile the differences between our positions and others. And TRPA, unlike other organizations here, was actually born of partnership. Partnership is literally in our DNA. It created us, and without collaboration, Tahoe exists only in this balkanized, disconnected, separate state. That partnership is the source of Tahoe's importance nationally and regionally. That partnership has actually brought billions in economic investment and environmental restoration benefit to the region. That partnership is why the states and the federal government are often willing to invest in Tahoe, to the synergistic benefit of local governments. And if we dissolve, or if we have a pattern of failure, and if we show we can't make it work, local governments alone here can't raise enough funds to pay for the kinds of improvements that we've all enjoyed and leveraged from our EIP: curb and gutter, roadway, meadow, marsh, aquatic invasives, forest health and treatments, streetscape, climate, housing, so many other. There's literally a 1.6 economic multiplier on all of the investments of the EIP. So our job one at TRPA isn't to show you how deeply we can differ with you or to demand full satisfaction of the way we want to do things. Our job is to show the very divided world what it takes to come together around a shared purpose and common ground. So that's the very different culture of Tahoe now. I call it the partnership way, the consensus seeking, agreement finding, and compromise-rich culture, without which there's very little progress for anyone here in Tahoe. As Cindy said, I'm retiring at the end of this week, so you're my final public audience. I appreciate the opportunity. I appreciate you listening. And I'm going to turn this back to the board chair and to Stephanie to take you the rest of the way. Thank you so much.
Well, don't go anywhere yet, Joanne. I want to make sure the board members can ask any questions of you before we continue with our presentation. And for my colleagues here, many of who were on the board, two of which were on the board during that Kings Beach project, I got to watch without responsibility while they had to make a vote. But I just want to say in front of them and to the public watching, Joanne has single-handedly, she won't take credit, but she rebuilt the agency with her vision and passion and commitment to a broken agency that, including myself and many others in our community, felt that the answer was always no. And you got it to an answer of yes. And how can we help facilitate the environmental improvements we needed desperately,
Yeah.
from sidewalks to bike trails to simple public projects that were stalled, as well as many other reinvestment opportunities. That legacy is going to live on, Joanne. You've set us up for success moving forward, and I just can't thank you enough for your leadership, and the turnaround that you've done is I know very apparent to the board members who don't hear when they come to Tahoe issues about TRPA. We hear plenty of issues when we're here that we aren't doing well, but we don't hear that TRPA is the stumbling block. And so it's an honor and a privilege to serve the agency now in another capacity representing this board. But Joanne, thank you for everything you've done. And I'm sure there's questions. So I'm going to look at my colleagues. Yes, Robert?
I don't have any questions, but just want to echo Cindy's compliments and congratulate you on your retirement. I was here when you came, and I would reinforce explicitly everything that Cindy mentioned. And you've just done a fabulous job of finding a way to have everybody move forward with some success. And I think the partnering and the collaboration, those were just great words to hear. So
Thank you.
I hope you enjoy your retirement. Stay involved. And again, thanks for your contribution.
Indeed. I like to not think of it as retirement, but transition.
There you go.
Supervisor Holmes.
Yes, thank you, Joanne, for all your leadership. Since I was the chair of the board during that Kings Beach Commercial Core, there was a very difficult, it was an easy decision, but trying to get everybody on board, we really had to work hard, and your leadership helped us get through that. And you see the results of that today. It's one of the most proudest things I've done for Tahoe on my service on the Board of Supervisors. So I know when I first came to the board, TRPA was, as been said, wondering what the heck was going on there. But you came in and you really made things hum, made it work. And so we're grateful for that. So I just want to thank you and wish you well.
Thank you.
Yes, Supervisor.
I would
Gore.
just like to say thank you for the overview. I really appreciate it. I appreciate the context. When I first came to the Sacramento region, all I heard, and that was in the 90s, all I heard were not so great things about TRPA. And I just thought of it as a horrible stumbling block, an agency that didn't get anything done and really people wanted to get rid of. And as I've been on the board now for coming on 4 years, it's not been an issue. And I really appreciate the background, because it really, for me, shows me where you've been and where you're at now. And I really appreciate that, because like Cindy said, we haven't had major issues in the last however many years, but since I've been on the board, it's like, okay, we're actually able to make some progress, and we're seeing progress made. And I know it takes time, and I can only imagine how challenging it is to balance all of the interests, but you've managed to make it happen. And so I really appreciate that. And it's really been great to see what's happened in this, in the basin, because of the efforts of you and TRPA.
Supervisor Jones.
Thank you very much for this timeline. It's been very helpful to understand a little bit more in depth. I did grow up in the Sacramento region all my life, and my dad loved Lake Tahoe. And believe me, the Olympics, he was fascinated, and he did come to visit one time. And so this just enlightens me a lot about things I did not realize, and the undercurrents of everything. But you all have done a great job with Lake Tahoe and keeping it beautiful and balancing it and keeping it a treasure for all of us who aren't blessed to live here. And also too, congratulations on your transition, moving on. And I hope you have a great time in that transition.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And I know that often for those of us up here, because recently Supervisor Jones asked us about SB 9, why certain laws don't necessarily apply in the Tahoe Basin the same way they do in other parts of the state.
Mhm.
And so much of that is built into this. Both states have to agree, and how we get to that compromise on dealing with housing and transportation solutions, because they don't follow our lines of various counties and states governments. Joanne, thank you again for this part of the presentation. I've had a request from a member of the public that someone else would like to speak. So I'm going to go to that before we go on, Stephanie. So Samir, if you want to come up, and if there's other members of the public out there that would like to say a few words, because many of us won't get the chance to see Joanne in an official capacity again. So.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity. My love affair with Tahoe started in 1987, the summer of 87. Came here and, just fell in love with the area. But my professional life here didn't start until 2012. And when I first arrived, everybody to a person told me, TRPA is a nightmare. You're never going to get your project done. It's just going to be in this enormous challenge. And so I said, okay, I hear you. So I spent some time, put together some ideas, and I walked into Joanne's office and sat down and explained to her what we wanted to do. And her response was, how do we make this happen? And I was just blown away. I said, well, this isn't what everybody said. This isn't, the evil empire here. This, and we started talking about collaboration and environmental redevelopment and the opportunities that presented. And I really was just stunned. And I remember going home and talking to the family and talking to other people in the Bay Area and just say, this is not your grandfather's TRPA. This is a whole different environment. And I didn't really appreciate where we were in the process, because 2012, the area plan, the regional plan was just being adopted. And we were talking about this area plan that was going to be put together and the collaboration and that process that we went through. And I think about when I started in that process, we bought a piece of property here, the Hendrickson property, and the appraiser couldn't find any comparables, any properties in the area that had traded in like the last decade. And now you fast forward to today and you think about the environmental redevelopment projects that are underway, that are in process, that are going to be, Joanne, part of your legacy. Really, honestly. The environment, the table that's set, and the progress that we're making as a community really is so much a function of your leadership. And I thank you for me personally, but also for the community. Really just thank you.
Thanks, Samir. Any other public comment? Okay. Well, we're going to let Stephanie continue, Joanne, but we really do appreciate you taking time this week to come and visit with the Board of Supervisors. And she didn't hesitate to come up and share her wisdom with us. So thank you.
Well, that is one hard act to follow. And Joanne, I just wanted to say thank you so much. From a staff perspective, I was involved from the transportation side and really supporting the regional transportation plan, but also developing the Placer County plan, as well as the VMT effort. And I did have people say, good luck to me when I took on that effort. And I can just tell you that there was not a moment that we weren't in lockstep with TRPA on both of those issues. So I really appreciate it. So with that, I'm going to, in the interest of time, because I do know that we need to get out of here fairly soon, I'm going to walk you through some touch points for your board's touch points in the community. This slide really builds off of the presentation that Joanne gave, highlights the Tahoe Basin Area Plan, which was adopted in 2017. Crystal Jacobson, our Deputy Director of CEDRO, was part of that effort. And it really set us, again, on this path towards implementation. The other thing that sort of fell out of this partnership and continued focus on the environment was in 2016, the Tahoe Truckee Area Regional Transit, or TART Systems Plan, was also adopted by your board, and it really expanded our focus, our roadmap for increased transit service into the future for our region, supporting more of that sustainable transportation mission. I talked about the area plan, which followed. This was a consolidated land use plan, really focusing on our town centers, and I'll talk a little bit off this map on some projects that we see coming forward. And then in 2019, your board has adopted the Resort Triangle Transportation Plan. This really focused on areas of congestion that we had on our feeder roadways into the basin, 89 and 267, as well as promoted some new sort of land use and transportation initiatives. I'll just point out a couple things on this map. In the Tahoe City area, we are starting to see redevelopment in conjunction with the regional plan goals. Samir Tuma was here to talk. He is instrumental in bringing forward the City Lodge project. We also have a project on the lakeshore called Boatworks, which is another redevelopment project for the Tahoe City area. The Fanny Bridge project is a partnership with TTD. That project will hopefully see phase 2 come forward fairly soon. And then in the Kings Beach area, we have a project that is another sort of catalyst project for that town center, 39 North. Is working its way through its review and permitting process. As there, a focus on parking management. So those are some of those mobility options that I talked about, as well as a trail network, expanding and connecting the final vision of alternative transportation. Let me just talk a little bit about economic incentives. Joanne talked about that balance between the natural environment and economic growth. Our economic incentives have really blossomed, I would say, since the adoption of the regional plan in 2012. Your board adopted the North Lake Tahoe Economic Development Incentive Program in 2015. This was really focused on promotion, removing barriers to lodging development in our town centers. The goal here for this program is really offsetting costs for lodging developments, as well as banking development rights, the tourist accommodation, develop lodging units in the basin. And then incentives for environmental and economic restoration. We've talked about that. But here's sort of a lineage of the original sort of economic study that was convened in 2015. It brought forward a first phase of economic incentives. The Tahoe Basin Area Plan followed that. And then another update to the Economic Incentive Program most recently, which some interest and some successes. And as you can see on the left is a rendition of the Tahoe City Lodge in Tahoe City. On the bottom, 39 North in the Kings Beach area, another lodging. So a number of projects working their way through. We're really encouraged to have those opportunities come to fruition in our town centers. So let me shift gears and talk a little bit about the tourism master plan. You can see here the 4 key areas of focus for the Tahoe, the tourism master plan. This is really another guiding document that we use in Eastern Placer County. It was initially envisioned in 1995, so it has a long history for us. It really encouraged local business and community members to envision a more sustainable tourism economy for us. So the master plan was developed concurrent with the passage of the first voter initiative for the TOT increase. So prior to this time frame, there was a TOT in place of 8%. Around the mid 1990s, the TOT was voted to be increased by an additional 2%. And that really supported a number of the priorities that came out of this plan. So projects, and I'll highlight a few here in a minute, but really a lot of projects came out of that additional 2% that was passed in the mid-1990s. This plan, you can see a number of plans on this slide. Like I said, initiated in the mid-1990s. It was updated in 2004, as well as the most recent update, which was in 2015. A little brief history on the TOT, as I mentioned, to 10% in 1996. It was renewed by voters in 2002, and then again, and most recently with the passage of Measure A, that 2% was voted to be continued into perpetuity or until repeal. That was a pretty instrumental decision in this particular Measure A this year, because it really allows us a more stable future for that revenue and that investment. Of the Tourism Master Plan in 1995. That plan was really envisioned in partnership with many community members. In a time of a static economy, we were really trying to promote tourism and support that tourism in the area. Fast forward the renewal in 2004. This was a time of when tourism was booming, and really the focus was a need for balance of community needs, as well as the introduction of workforce housing. So a lot of what we hear today was alive and well back in 2004 around this issue. So fast forward in 2015, another update post-recession, and again, heavy focus on building a system. That ebb and flow, we've had some ebb and flow in this planning environment as well. So dare I say we are post-pandemic era, and again, we're talking around tourism mitigation and workforce housing. So, I think I mentioned that the 2% that was recently renewed into perpetuity really gives us a framework moving forward. I think, there's a lot of discussion with the North Lake Tahoe Resort Association around a potential update of this plan that really gives us a full breadth of the needs of the community, as well as our needs for a stable economy. So I just wanted to mention, along this timeline, 2017, your board did adopt this TOT investment policy. And really important for our community was the statement that your board made around 100% of the TOT funds that are collected in North Lake Tahoe stay in North Lake Tahoe to really promote a number of these issues and support these issues: promotion of tourism, mitigation of impacts, and then support for public infrastructure moving forward.
And if I can just say,
Sure.
thank you to the board members that voted for that. We're the only jurisdiction in the basin making that level of investment, and that's seen throughout everything we do related to tourism. So thank you, Robert and Jim, and for that support years ago.
So just to flash up the language of the most recent ballot measure and passage of that 2% renewal here: quality of life, really resonating for our local culture and our local community, workforce housing, and a number of different challenges you'll see on that measure. So like I said, really sets us up for a framework of So talking about our special districts, I had mentioned that the goal today was to layer a number of different partners, Joanne and TRPA, TTD, and federal and state partners, as well as our partners from other counties, but really wanted to highlight our special districts. What makes Tahoe unique for me is the amount of partners that are really invested and the collaboration that happens across boundaries in this region. Our special districts really provide us with that second layer, like I mentioned, providing us with services such as water, sewer, our parks and rec, fire, schools, transportation. So when we talk about quality of life, these organizations and these special districts are really instrumental in helping us with that mission. Flashing on the screen here, a number of different projects. These are capital projects, really transformative projects that implement that master plan and a number of the different initiatives that we've had over the years. And the reason I threw it in the slide deck here, a lot of these projects were delivered, funded through TOT, but delivered by our special partnership from the county, from the community, and having them at the table with us and delivering projects. And that leads me to the community partners. I ran out of room on this slide, so so bear with me if your organization isn't on this slide, but tried to really hit a lot of the areas that I personally have been involved in and communicated with in the last 9 months. This is really the third layer. Serve as our tool to unlock the community engagement, business coordination, as well as private investments. So I won't highlight all of them because I know we're running out of time, but I did want to key up a couple of organizations and committees that advise your board and have advised your board over the years. This one, the Capital Projects Advisory Committee, the CAP Committee, was really put into place. Our board, it is co-convened and co-chaired by the North Lake Association. It is focused on capital investments, and we do that through a annual grant program, an annual cycle, which implements master plan initiatives. This is a slide that we recently put together. It was a poll that we did of the current CAP committee on the most priority areas of the current tourism master plan. You can see here workforce housing, trails really rise, transportation rises to the very top. I will mention workforce housing is a bit of a sort of an ebb and flow throughout this process. As I mentioned, in 2004, it was a focus in the master plan. It is also currently a focus in the TOT language. So that has been sort of a resonating outlier that has kind of ebbed and flows with that economic cycle, but obviously continues to be a focus for us today. So just really an interesting slide of what the current CAP committees see as priorities. Transportation Management Association, the largest I have in my repertoire, with the mission of really providing that think tank. It is a member organization, a number of different transportation initiatives within the North Tahoe region. It continues to also support our region at the TRPA level and a number of our state and federal organizations also attend those board meetings. So 13-member board there. They meet monthly and are supported by 2 staff members. And then last but certainly not least, the North Lake Tahoe Resort. This organization actually was founded in 1954. So even predates TRPA potentially. In 1995, this chamber joined with the Visitors and Convention Bureau and became NLTRA. Since the 1990s, the organization has served the business community on both the destination marketing as well as the Chamber of Commerce services. Your board recently formed a T-bid, as many of you remember, with the North Lake Tahoe Resort Association, and really allowed them to self-fund on a number of different initiatives within the business community. We have a 5-year agreement with them that they are currently in the process of working through that agreement. The understanding with that agreement is that the TOT that previously funded this organization, the freed up TOT workforce housing and transportation needs. So I'm going to steal Tony's thunder. I'm going to change slides here. The president board tomorrow to give you an update and a presentation on their and where they're headed. So talk a little bit about some current priorities. I'll just spend a couple of minutes here. This a couple of times already today, but workforce housing, transportation, just a couple of the really key areas. Workforce housing is probably hands down our biggest challenge of the local economies today. Placer County continues, and your staff continues to devote to the resources around this discussion, really coming at this with our partners. You see a couple of our partners on this slide to really try to solve some of these issues around workforce housing, from incentives to rent to buy, as well as really a focus on development of workforce housing in the region, some streamlining tools that we're working on with TRPA. We do see this as a three-legged stool, or there's probably more legs we haven't invented yet, but spending a lot of resource and a lot of time on this, a lot of people heavily engaged in this area. And then on the transportation front, I mentioned earlier mobility services and the focus on mobility and new programs around that, really supporting our desired goals of a less that we've initiated, TART Connecting, a very successful mobility option for us, as well as our coordination with TRPA on BMT efforts and services around mobility. We are also focused on infrastructure, though, still, but infrastructure that really helps us achieve that alternative transportation mission. So you see Fanny Bridge, the transit priority lanes, all really meant to sort of focus us out of our cars into transit, into bike, walkable communities, and achieve our mission. And I'd be remiss if I didn't put a number of equally important and elevated conversations that we're having with our regional partners, from climate change to fire resilience, emergency evacuations, as well as our challenges on the cost of labor and construction in the region, really all culminating in a lot of future work and future discussions in these specific areas. And with that, I'm going to close, and hopefully I've given us enough time. I wanted to again say thank you to Joanne, thank you to your board, hopefully educational. It's been a pleasure of mine to serve your board in this capacity and really put a lot of these pieces together for the North Tahoe region, and happy to take any questions.
Thank you so much, Stephanie. I really appreciate it. Board members, any questions?
No? Okay.
They're pondering. Okay, Robert.
Don't have any questions again, but great compliments to Stephanie for the whole program was great historical sketch and provides a lot of perspective and background. And, I'm really excited about the direction that we're taking, particularly up here with a lot of issues, transportation and housing. I think just amazing progress in the last 10 years. So thanks again.
You're welcome.
Supervisor Gore.
Thank you, Stephanie, and really appreciate the overview from sort of a 30,000 foot level. As I think about Joanne's presentation about TRPA and what's happening in the basin, I think about who else needs to know this, and perhaps our planning commission. And it wouldn't even have to be an on the road. It could be have them watch this presentation, because I think it was just so very helpful. And you might even share this portion with the community, so that community members, especially new folks to the area who have not been here for decades, can really understand all the work that's been done in the past and where we're at now and where we're trying to move forward to. So I just think that this was such a helpful presentation.
Supervisor Holmes.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Yeah, it's I've been up here almost 18 years, and we've actually got a lot done, but you don't realize how much you get done until you put it down on paper. And all the work that's been done, from the commercial core improvement project to go on, and with more to be done, we're not finished. So it's real refreshing to feel that, we've actually get stuff done around here, no matter how long it takes. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Stephanie. I really appreciate, Stephanie jumping into this role. I know she wasn't quite sure, and certainly she gets to do the commute the reverse way I do the commute. And she's really just jumped in all the way to partner within the county departments as well as with our outside partners because it does take so much coordination to make things happen. So really appreciate you putting it into a brief presentation because we could talk all
Oh,
day.
yes.
Often our meetings alone on issues take longer. When she briefs me on things that take longer than what you
Yeah.
put together today. So thank you.
You're welcome.
And we'll look for any public comment on this item. Okay, well, I'm not seeing any. Again, I'd like to offer that we do a standing ovation for Joanne and thanking her for her leadership. So if you'll join me. And we'll see Joanne in a little bit because we are now going to adjourn this meeting and reconvene a dedication ceremony up at Dollar Creek Trail to commemorate another legend of our region, Larry Sevison. So thank you for attending today, and we'll see you in a few minutes.